In the heart of the Wyoming Badlands, where the wind howled like a lonesome wolf and the thunder cracked the sky open like a judge's gavel, Elias Thorne rode his weary mare home through sheets of rain that blurred the line between earth and heaven. It was the kind of storm that swallowed men whole, the sort that had claimed his wife's life a decade ago, leaving him a hollow shell tending to a ranch that felt more like a graveyard than a home. As lightning forked across the black horizon, illuminating the sagging porch of his isolated cabin, a faint, desperate knock pierced the gale, 3 timid raps, barely audible over the roar. Elias froze in the saddle, his calloused hand tightening on the reins. No one came this far out uninvited, not in weather like this. Not anymore. He dismounted, boots sinking into the mud, and slung his rifle over his shoulder, not out of fear, but habit, for the wild didn't forgive the unprepared. The door creaked open to reveal a figure huddled on the threshold, cloaked in a threadbare shawl that clung like a second skin, soaked through to the bone. She was slight, her posture curved inward as if the weight of the world pressed her toward the ground. A strip of white cloth, stained and frayed, wrapped tightly around her head and face, leaving only her eyes visible, wide, haunted pools of emerald green that flickered with terror and resolve. "Please," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread unraveling in the wind, "don't take the cloth off." The words tumbled out like a prayer, laced with such raw plea that Elias felt them lodge in his chest like buckshot. He stood there, rain streaming down his weathered face, the lines etched deep from years of sun and sorrow, and for a moment, he considered turning her away. Strangers brought trouble, and his ranch, 300 acres of stubborn sagebrush and half-wild cattle, was no place for charity. But those eyes, they held the echo of his Mary's, the wife who'd begged him once, in her final hours, not to let the fever claim her spirit before her body. "Come in," he grunted, stepping aside, his voice rough as gravel. She hesitated, one trembling hand clutching the doorframe, then slipped inside like a shadow fleeing the light. The door shut behind her with a finality that sealed them both from the storm's fury. The cabin was sparse, warmed only by the flickering hearth Elias had stoked earlier that evening. A single lantern cast long shadows across the rough-hewn walls, illuminating a table scarred by years of solitary meals and a shelf of dog-eared books, tattered volumes of poetry and ranching manuals that had been Mary's favorites. The woman, girl, really, no older than 30, hovered near the fire, dripping puddles onto the worn floorboards. She kept her back to him, unwinding the shawl just enough to reveal sodden clothes that spoke of hard travel, a faded calico dress, patched at the hems, and boots caked with the red dust of distant roads. "Name's Elias," he said, hanging his hat on a peg. "You got one?" "Anna," she murmured, so softly he almost missed it. She didn't turn, didn't offer a hand. Instead, her fingers toyed with the edge of the cloth, ensuring it stayed fast. Elias busied himself with the kettle, filling it from the rain barrel he dragged inside earlier, the routine a shield against the awkward silence. He'd seen drifters before, folks fleeing debts or demons, but none like this, wrapped in mystery as if she carried a secret too heavy for the light of day. "Storm'll pass by mornin'," he said, setting a tin mug of black coffee before her on the table. "You headed east?" "Town's 20 miles that way." She nodded faintly, sinking onto the edge of a chair, her posture rigid as a fence post. "Thank you, mister. For the shelter. I won't be no trouble." Her voice carried the lilt of the Appalachians, soft vowels rounded by mountains far from this flat expanse of prairie. Elias watched her from across the room, nursing his own coffee, the steam curling like ghosts between them. Trouble, he thought wryly, was what his life had become, a widower at 45, with a herd that barely paid the taxes and memories that gnawed at him like coyotes on a bone. But there was something in her desperation that stirred the embers of the man he'd buried with Mary. Kindness, he'd long ago convinced himself, was a luxury for fools. Yet here he was, offering his fire to a stranger who begged him not to see her face. That night, as the storm raged on, Anna slept fitfully on the pallet he'd made up by the hearth, her breaths shallow and uneven. Elias lay awake in his loft, staring at the rafters, the rain drumming a relentless tattoo on the tin roof. He wondered what horror hid beneath that cloth, a fever scar, perhaps, or the mark of some outlaw's blade. In the small hours, when the wind finally sighed to a whisper, he rose and checked on her. She murmured in her sleep, words fragmented like shattered glass, "No, don't look, it's ruined." Elias turned away, a pang twisting in his gut. He'd known ruin once, the kind that seeped into your soul and left you hollow. Maybe that's why he didn't press her come dawn. The sun broke through the clouds like a hesitant promise, painting the Badlands in hues of gold and rust. Elias stepped out to tend the stock, the chill air sharp with the scent of wet earth and pine. When he returned, Anna was up, the cloth still in place, her hands busy scrubbing the breakfast dishes with a fervor that bordered on penance. "You don't have to," he started, but she waved him off, her eyes downcast. "I owe you," she said simply. "Let me earn my keep till the mud dries enough to walk." And so it began, an uneasy truce forged in the quiet rhythm of ranch life. Anna proved no stranger to hard labor, she mucked stalls with a quiet efficiency that surprised him, her slight frame belying a strength born of necessity. She scattered feed to the chickens without complaint, even when the hens pecked at her ankles, and mended a tear in his best shirt with stitches so fine they rivaled Mary's. Elias watched her from the corral fence, hammer paused mid-swing as he repaired a broken post, wondering at the enigma she'd brought to his door. She spoke little of herself, only that she'd come from the hills of Tennessee, chasing a whisper of opportunity in the West, but her silences were eloquent, heavy with unspoken grief. Days blurred into a week, the mud roads thawing under a benevolent sun. Elias found excuses to keep her on, a lame colt that needed gentling, a fence line sagging under winter's weight. In the evenings, they shared meals of beans and cornbread, the conversation skirting the edges of safety, tales of wild mustangs, the folly of claim jumpers in Cheyenne, the way the stars wheeled brighter out here than anywhere else. Once, emboldened by the fire's glow, Elias shared a sliver of his own story, how Mary had loved the wildflowers that bloomed defiant against the frost, how her laugh could coax a smile from the devil himself. Anna listened, her head tilted, the cloth a constant veil. "Sounds like she was a light," she said softly. "Some folks are born to chase shadows instead." He chuckled, a rusty sound unused for years. "And you? What's got you hidin' from the sun, Anna?" She stiffened, fingers tightening on her fork, and the moment shattered like thin ice. "Nothin' worth seein'," she replied, rising to clear the table. Elias let it drop, but the question lingered, a burr under his saddle. He began to notice the small things, how she flinched at sudden noises, how her hands bore faint scars like lace across the knuckles, burn marks, he guessed, from some kitchen mishap or worse. And always, that cloth, tied with a stubborn knot at the nape of her neck, as if untying it would unravel her very self. It was on the 10th day, as they rode out to check the upper pasture, that the first crack appeared in her armor. The sky had turned brooding again, fat clouds swelling like bruises, but the air hummed with the promise of spring, coyotes yipping in the distance, the faint green haze of new grass pushing through the soil. Elias led on his mare, Anna perched behind him on the old buckskin gelding they'd saddled for her, her arms loose around his waist to steady against the trot. The trail narrowed through a thicket of chokecherry, branches clawing at their legs like insistent fingers. One low-hanging limb snagged the edge of her cloth, yanking it loose with a sharp rip. Time slowed as the fabric fluttered free, caught by the wind like a surrendered flag, revealing the ruin beneath. Anna's face, oh, God, her face. The left side was a map of devastation, puckered scar tissue twisted from temple to jaw, the flesh mottled pink and white, pulling her eye half shut and twisting her lip into a perpetual half-snarl. It wasn't the raw horror of fresh injury, but the healed cruelty of fire, the kind that sears not just skin but soul. She screamed, a raw, animal sound that echoed off the canyon walls, and clawed at his back, trying to dismount, to flee into the brush. "No. Don't look. Please, God, don't look." The buckskin shied, rearing slightly, and Elias twisted in the saddle, grabbing her wrists before she could tumble to the rocks. "Easy, Anna. Hold on. His voice cut through her panic, steady as the ranch's old oak. She bucked against him, tears carving clean paths down the scarred cheek, her body racked with sobs that seemed to shake the very earth. The cloth danced away on the breeze, lost to the undergrowth, and in that moment, stripped bare, she was both monstrous and achingly human. Elias wrapped his arms around her, holding her fast to his chest as the horse settled, his own heart thundering like a stampede. "It's all right," he murmured into her hair, which smelled of soap and wild sage. "I see you. And you're still here." She went limp against him, the fight draining out like blood from a wound. They sat there on the trail, the clouds gathering overhead, until her breaths evened to ragged gasps. "It happened 3 years back," she whispered finally, her voice muffled against his shirt. "My husband, he was a drinker, mean when the bottles sang to him. One night, he torched the cabin after a row, said he'd rather see it all burn than let me leave. I got our boy out, little Timmy, just 4 years old. But the beam fell, caught me full in the face. Timmy didn't make it. The fire took him while I lay screamin' in the dirt." Her words hung heavy, laced with the ash of regret. "Folks back home, they called me the witch after that. Said my sins marked me. I ran west, hid the scar so no one turned me away. But it's all I see when I look in the water. Ruined. Unlovable." Elias listened, the pieces slotting into place like a puzzle he'd half-solved in dreams. Her silences, her flinches, they weren't cowardice, but the armor of a survivor who'd paid too dearly for trust. He thought of Mary, how the fever had withered her from the inside, leaving him to stare at a stranger in her bed. How he'd raged at God, at doctors, at the empty ranch that mocked him with its silence. "I ain't one to preach," he said at last, easing the horse forward at a walk, her arms still looped around him as if he were the only anchor in the storm. "But ruinin'? That's what we do to ourselves, Anna. The fire took your face, and the bottle took my Mary. But it didn't take you. Or me. We're still ridin'. She didn't respond, but her grip tightened, a silent tether. They returned to the cabin in the gathering dusk, the scar now an open secret between them. That night, Elias didn't light the lantern, instead, he built the fire high, the flames dancing shadows across her features without mercy or judgment. Over venison stew simmered slow with onions from the root cellar, she spoke more, halting tales of Tennessee hollows, of Timmy's chubby fists clutching wild violets, of the quilt she'd pieced from scraps of his baby clothes, now folded in her satchel like a talisman. Elias shared his own ghosts, the way Mary's grave overlooked the creek where they'd courted, the letters he'd never sent to her kin back east. In the vulnerability of firelight, the cloth's absence felt less like exposure and more like freedom, a shedding of the lie that had bound her tighter than any knot. But dawn brought reckoning. A rider appeared on the horizon, dust plume rising like a warning, Sheriff Harlan from Laramie, his badge glinting under the sun. Elias spotted him from the porch, Anna freezing mid-chop as she diced potatoes for the noon meal. "Trouble?" she asked, her hand instinctively rising to her cheek, as if the cloth might magically reappear. "Could be," Elias replied, stepping down to meet the lawman. Harlan dismounted with a weary sigh, tipping his hat. "Mornin', Elias. Word from town, a woman's been spotted wanderin' these parts. Matches the description of one Anna Hale, wanted for arson back east. Husband burned up in a fire she set, they say. Bounty on her head, dead or alive." The words landed like a gut punch. Elias glanced back at the cabin door, where Anna stood pale as milkweed, her scars stark in the light. Arson. The story she'd spun, victim turned fugitive in the retelling of small-town tongues. He could see it clear as day, grief twisted into accusation, a widow's flight branded as crime. Harlan eyed him shrewdly. "You seen her?" Elias met the sheriff's gaze, steady as Wyoming granite. Lies came easy to ranchers, born of blizzards and bartered deals, but this one tasted like betrayal. "Ain't no one here but me and the ghosts, Harlan. You know that." The sheriff lingered, squinting toward the cabin, then spat tobacco juice into the dust. Fair enough. But if she shows, wire the office. Folks deserve justice. He remounted and rode off, the dust settling like a veil over the lie. Inside, Anna paced like a caged bobcat, her face a storm of fear and fury. You should have turned me in. Bounty'd set you up for life, new stock, maybe even sell this godforsaken spread. She grabbed her satchel, stuffing in the quilt with trembling hands. I'm leavin' tonight. Before they come back. Elias blocked the door, his frame filling the frame like an unyielding post. And go where? Back to hidin' in shadows? Or straight to a noose for a fire you didn't light? She shoved at him, but he held firm, gentle as he would a spooked filly. Listen to me, Anna. I know what it's like to carry blame that ain't yours. After Mary, I drank myself numb, thought every bolt of lightning was her cursin' me from the grave. Nearly lost the ranch to it. But a neighbor, old Jed from the next valley, he didn't preach. He just showed up one mornin' with a hammer and a jug of cider. Said, build somethin', Elias. Ghosts don't swing hammers. And damn if he wasn't right. She sank onto the bed, head in hands, the scar pulling taut with her sobs. What if they hang me? What if I'm the monster they say? You're no monster, Elias said, kneeling before her, his voice cracking for the first time since Mary's passing. You're the woman who pulled a child from flames, who mucked my stalls without a whine, who mends better than any seamstress in Laramie. That's the truth they'll never print in a wanted poster. He paused, the weight of his next words pressing like the storm clouds massing anew. Stay. Let me help you fight this. We'll ride to town, tell your side to a judge who ain't bought by whispers. I've got a cousin in the prosecutor's office, owes me from a cattle deal gone south. But you gotta trust me. And yourself. Anna lifted her head, those emerald eyes searching his face for the lie, finding only the raw honesty of a man who'd stared down his own abyss. The moment stretched, taut as a bowstring, until she nodded, a small, seismic shift. All right, she whispered. But if it goes south, you promise you'll let me run. Deal, he said, though his heart whispered otherwise. The ride to Laramie was a gauntlet of dust and doubt, 2 days under a sun that baked the lies from their bones. Elias rode ahead, Anna's face uncovered now, a banner of defiance fluttering in the wind. Town met them with sidelong glances and murmurs, the rancher's woman, scarred and strange, but Elias walked tall, his arm a steady anchor at her elbow. At the courthouse, a squat brick building squat as a badger, they faced Judge Harlan, no kin to the sheriff, thank God, but a fair man with a mustache like a broom bristle. Elias's cousin, Tom, arrived by train from Cheyenne, papers in hand, affidavits from Tennessee neighbors who'd witnessed the fire, sworn statements branding Anna's husband the arsonist, his jealousy a fuse lit by moonshine and madness. The hearing unfolded like a poorly scripted melodrama, the courtroom stuffy with the scent of oiled wood and unwashed wool. The sheriff testified first, his voice dripping scorn as he waved the wanted poster, Anna's pre-fire likeness, serene and smiling, a ghost mocking the woman before them. She fled the scene, Your Honor. Left her husband's body to the flames. Motive clear as day, insurance money, or lover's quarrel. Gasps rippled through the gallery, a smattering of ranchers and shopkeepers who'd come for the spectacle. Anna gripped the witness stand, knuckles white, her scar on full display, a challenge to their stares. Then it was her turn. She rose, voice steady as the Platte River, recounting the night in unflinching detail, the husband's rage, the match struck in fury, the beam's collapse, Timmy's tiny hand slipping from hers in the smoke. I didn't set that fire, she said, meeting every eye in the room. It set me. Took my boy, marked my face, but it didn't take my truth. Elias watched from the back, pride swelling like spring rain in his chest. When Tom presented the affidavits, yellowed pages bearing the scrawls of folk who'd known her mercy, not her malice, the tide shifted. Whispers turned to nods,